My name is Megha, and welcome back to Couple of Expats if you're new to our channel. The channel talks about living, studying, and working in Finland, and today we are talking about PhDs in Finland. So if you're interested in coming to Finland to pursue your PhD, you are in the perfect place, because that's what we're going to be discussing today. And today's video is going to be a little different because we have a special guest for you. Shruti Jain, who is herself currently a PhD student and about to finish her PhD, will be sharing her knowledge with you, and we will be asking all of the important questions about what you need to know if you are going to be doing a PhD in Finland. So continue watching. So, welcome to Couple of Expats, Shruti. We are so glad that you're able to join us today and share your story with the audience. If you could tell a little bit about your backstory. When did you come to Finland? How long has it been? Where did you come from? And how has your PhD journey been?
It's very nice to be here, Megha, first of all. And I am Shruti Jain. I came from India in 2016 to pursue my master's in biotechnology. I then ended up also doing my PhD here in Finland, and so far the journey has been excellent.
So, is there any particular reason you decided to stay in Finland after your master's was over for your PhD?
So my PhD topic at the moment is a continuation of my master's thesis, and I really like the lab as well as the topic, which is why I decided to stay in Finland, also for my PhD.
Makes sense. And what about the requirements for getting into PhD? Do you have any advice for our listeners who might be interested in getting a PhD themselves someday?
All right. So first of all, the official requirements for a PhD. Usually the application opens twice a year, the first one in March, at least at the University of Turku, and the second one in September. The funded positions open only once a year in September. So when you're making an application, you have to fill a form, which is actually not very difficult. It's the attachments which are more complicated, like the research plan. And then in some doctoral programs, you also need to submit a motivation letter. Also, it is very important that you have to find a supervisor beforehand, and that can be a little difficult for people who have not been in Finland beforehand. So you have to, apply, you have to email, you have to look up the labs, you have to look up the supervisors, and you have to make an agreement already beforehand with the supervisors, because they are the ones who will then also decide what the research plan, or at least you form the research plan along with them.
Okay, that's very interesting. So good to know is that while you are applying only once a year, it's very good to be prepared several months in advance. So make sure you have ample amount of time. It will take time to get in touch with a professor who might be interested and find what area of research you might be interested in working in. So while the application itself is not difficult, remember that there should be a lot of planning that goes into the process beforehand. All right, so a lot of you have left questions about PhD, so I assume that that's what some of you are interested in. So let's hear from Shruti what kind of grant and scholarships are available for students who are coming from outside of Finland.
So usually the first or the best option when you're applying for a PhD is to also apply for the research position or the doctoral grant that is already available from the university that you can do along with your own application. And the max that the university will give you is for 2 years, but it is very good to get those if you can, although it is very, very competitive to get those. Along with that, there are a lot of other outside grants that PhD students can apply for. There are multiple foundations in Finland who give grants, although the grants can vary from anywhere to like 2 to 3 months to even like a year or two at the time. So try and get the grants for as long as you can, because that will make your PhD life that much more easier. Along with that, you can also get grants from your own supervisors. They might have secured some funding and they might also pay you. So from a science perspective, this is the various options that anyone can apply to get funding during their PhD.
Great. So I think key points there are that there's many options. It really depends on what your PhD is, so what field, yes. And then try to find out more from your university, what kind of options. Of course, your supervisor is probably the best person to go to at this point, and they will guide you, but there are definitely many options out there.
Yes. Just to add one more point to it, along with the supervisors, other PhD students and your colleagues are also very great options to, take advice from, because they have gone through the process, they have applied, so they probably know even more.
Absolutely, absolutely. Very good point. So if you're comfortable enough, I would love to know what kind of grants and scholarships you've received, because I know Shruti's a brilliant student, so I'm sure you have secured something.
So I started my PhD in January of 2020 when the university still in some of the doctoral programs gave a funding of 4 years at the most. So I got one of those doctoral grants from the university, 4-year one, and I'm like a little over 4 years now in my PhD. I'm just about to finish. So I also applied for some of the grants after the 4 years. And I have gotten multiple grants from like also outside organizations, like end-stage PhD grants, to write the dissertation, to complete the dissertation process, basically.
Okay, so you have secured funding almost for the entire duration of your PhD.
Yes. I was one of the lucky ones, I would say, but
it is possible.
Yes, it is definitely possible.
Okay, so let's talk about what was the application process like? What can an international student expect when they're applying for a PhD?
So when they're applying for a PhD, the first thing is the language test. So you need to show some kind of like an English language test like IELTS, TOEFL or something else, or you can also show that your previous education has continuously been in English if that is recognized by the university here in Finland. So English language test is the first thing. Then the second thing is you need to have a research plan that you basically make along with your supervisors. So you need to first find minimum 2 supervisors. I would advise that you first find one supervisor or in the main lab that you want to work in, because then that supervisor can help you find another supervisor who would be willing to be on your PhD application. Then you also need an advisory committee, usually of 3 people. And those advisory committees are also suggested by the supervisor. So again, supervisor plays a very big role. And again, all of these things take a lot of time. So you have to start like months in advance. Then the third thing is when you're applying for the right to pursue a degree and at the same time you're applying for the doctoral position from the university, a lot of the doctoral programs also need to go through an interview process. So for that, for example, in my case, I had to give like a presentation, and then I also had to answer a lot of questions from a panel. In my case, there were 10 people. It depends from doctoral program to doctoral program. But yes, so you have to go through also the interview process in that case.
Okay, so key takeaways: language test, multiple supervisors, advisory committee, as well as a very scary interview. So, good luck. So, I must admit, the application process does seem kind of difficult, kind of a bit of a hassle. Of course, it's worth it, because 4-year PhD in Finland, it is worth it. But is there any way to do it? Is there any easier way that one could approach this?
Yes. So instead of, going through all the process of contacting and finding supervisors, there's also these open vacancies that are released by the university where the project is already decided, supervisors are decided, and funding has already been secured. So you can directly apply to those positions and make the application. So that would be an easier way to go about doing it. And one of the more popular ways this is funded is through the Marie Curie fellowships, for example.
Amazing. So if you are interested, be sure to check out your own university's vacancy page. That's where these PhD positions will be listed. And then there is no hassle of looking for grants as well as PhD supervisors. So we just talked about language requirements, and you of course have to prove that about your language proficiency in English. But how about Finnish? Have you, in your years of being in Finland, seen that it's necessary to have Finnish skills, or is it okay to have proficient English skills?
So first I'll talk about Finnish from like my PhD perspective. I don't think in my PhD degree per se, especially in the science fields, Finnish is that much of a requirement. Like usually you can go about very easily working in English. because most of the papers or the data that we publish is all in English, and there's a lot of international community also within the science side. So Finnish is not required so much in the sciences, but it could be different for other fields like education maybe. And from outside of the PhD perspective, it's always good to know the local language. It makes your life easier when you're living in a foreign country.
Yeah, very valid point. And fun fact, Shruti and I actually belong to the same department. We both studied in the Department of Biotechnology at the University of Turku. And here we are many years later.
Yes. Life comes back full circle.
Yeah, who would have thought? So, PhDs all over the world can be very different in different countries. So let's talk about what is the normal PhD structure in Finland and what is the duration. If you could tell us a little bit more about that.
So usually the minimum is 4 years, or maybe nowadays starting out 3, but most often it takes easily 5 to 6 years to finish a PhD, very realistically speaking. So in total in PhD, you need 240 credits, out of which 200 credits are from doing your thesis itself, and then 40 credits comes from attending different courses. The structure is such that there are going to be some mandatory courses in different programs. Ethics is one course that is, I think, common throughout all the programs, and then the other courses will vary depending on the field. And you can, of course, do extra if you want, but 240 is the minimum that is required.
Great. And what kind of milestones have you come across or do you know of during a PhD in Finland?
So at least at the University of Turku, we have this thing where every year you need to have a meeting with your advisory committee along with your supervisors. And that kind of is like a checkpoint. It's usually at the beginning of the year, sometime in January. And you basically discuss what all things you have finished in terms of courses, in terms of research, in terms of publications. Because during your PhD, again, it varies in different areas, in different fields. But for example, in my field in biotechnology, we need to have a minimum of 2 published papers along with 1 manuscript before we graduate. So all of these kind of different things you discuss in that meeting, and they also guide you during that process. And if you have any questions or concerns, you can also address it at the same time. So that kind of acts as a checkpoint throughout your PhD to make sure that you are on track.
Is teaching also part of your PhD?
Yes. So along with research, we are also supposed to dedicate a certain percentage of our time towards teaching. That can be either classroom teaching or it can also be lab supervisions. For example, supervising master thesis students or summer trainees or any other research assistants that might come across in the lab at the time.
Whether a curriculum in a PhD curriculum, is it set in stone or are you able to customize it according to your interests? How does that work?
So one of the good things I think in Finland is that it's very flexible. Like I mentioned, the 40 credits you have to get from different courses. Some of them are mandatory, but the other are very, very flexible. Some of them you have to pick, of course, from your own field of study, but there's also an option to go beyond your field of study as well. Even though, for example, you're in science, you can take up some of the basic courses from the business or management side as well, which is one of the big positives about studying in Finland, I feel.
Yeah, I definitely like it when people are not put into a box and you can just have different interests. I think we should all be able to have more than one interest, and that's always very good.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's suppose there are people who are interested to come. They want to do a PhD in Finland. They're excited to do a PhD in Finland. But what kind of career prospects can they expect to have after completing their PhD?
So usually after PhD, most often there are 2 paths. One is staying in academia or then moving out of academia. So staying in academia and doing a postdoc is definitely an option here in Finland. You can continue in the same lab, or if you want to switch up labs, that is also a possibility. But it becomes a little harder after that because getting a tenure track position in Finland is not the easiest for international people. Let's talk about the other side of it outside of academia. Again, I would say that is a little bit harder here in Finland because knowing the local language is a big requirement for most of the companies. And so international people find it a little hard to get there in industries.
Yeah, and she has a very valid point. I do not have a PhD, but I have a background in biotechnology, and I have been in Finnish industries from almost day one. I already have 5 years in the Finnish health tech industry, so it's not impossible, but I do agree with you completely that it's not easy either. Do you have any advantages of having a PhD or any challenges of having a PhD, of doing a PhD in Finland that you'd like to share with us?
Sure, there are a couple. So let's talk about the advantages first. One of the advantages that I think of doing a PhD in Finland is that they have a requirement in regards to publication. So when you get out of doing a PhD, you know for sure that you will have a minimum of 1 or 2 or even more, if you're lucky, publications at the end of it, which is very good for your career afterwards. And another point, which I think can be both an advantage or a challenge at the same time, is in regards to supervision. Because PhDs in Finland are quite independent, so you don't really get a lot of supervisions. You have to figure a lot of things out by yourself. And that can be a bit of a challenge especially for those who are coming right out from classrooms or don't really have a lot of lab experience. I'm talking from a science perspective. So for them, it can be a little bit of a challenge, but I feel it is also a big advantage because at the end of it, you become a much more independent, much more experienced researcher after you go through that process as a whole. So another advantage that I think during a PhD in Finland is that as part of a curriculum, we have to get like certain credits from different sections. So one of the sections is about attending conferences or making presentations outside. So you most often during your PhDs in Finland travel to various conferences, do poster presentations or oral presentations, and you get a lot of experience of that, along with the opportunity to network with your peers and colleagues from around the world at the same time.
So, doing a PhD does not mean that you will be locked in the lab and then that is it. You are never going to come out of the lab. There's actually much more to PhD life. And we focused a lot about the PhD aspect, but what about the life aspect?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think during your PhD, you also get the opportunity to build up on other skills, which could be very, very useful and advantage for your career afterwards. For example, if you're a good public speaker, you can participate in multiple competitions like the 3MT, which is a 3-minute thesis competition. Basically, summarize your thesis in 3 minutes. That happens every year at the University of Turku. Then another one is Millennium Graduate Student Contest, which is another pitching competition. So, and it's not just limited to these two. I'm sure there are multiple other pitching competitions as well. So recently, I also got an opportunity to attend the Global Young Scientist Summit in Singapore through Technology Academy of Finland. So they basically select some PhD students from around Finland who are studying in various universities, and you get to attend this reputed conference in Singapore where all the Nobel laureates, the Turing Award winners, the Fields medalists, and the Millennium Technology Prize winners come. So that's like a very, very good opportunity that you can get here in Finland along with that. So I think there's a lot of different skills and opportunities that you can do or you get along with your PhD. If not this, if you're a good writer, I'm sure there's like a lot of blog writing opportunities at the same time. For example, in the science fields, there's there are various blogs within specific fields in science that are also run within the university, and you can participate and contribute to that. So basically, you have the option or the opportunity to build upon whatever skills that you are interested in.
So that's an amazing point, and what Shruti has not mentioned is the fact that she has actually won multiple pitching competitions herself. So congratulations for that.
Thank you.
You clearly see that if you take that step forward towards life in Finland, you really develop your skills along the way. I'm sure a lot of us didn't have these skills 5 years ago or 4 years ago, and we have just been constantly developing these skills. And once you venture outside the lab or outside of your studies, there's also a lot to offer. Shruti is also very active in the Indian community in Finland, if you want to share a few words about that.
Yeah, sure. So I think it was during COVID times when me and some of my friends realized that there was not really a local Indian student organization, and then we ended up making one. So it was an interesting and a fun process for us because, you know, it's a new country and there are new procedures and processes that you have to do to make a new organization, and we did it from scratch. So that was like one of our side activities, and then that actually helped us build up also a student community, and it gave us as much as we gave the organization at the same time. We organized multiple functions using that platform, various Indian community and activities, and which not just us Indians but also a lot of international and the local Finns could also participate in. So it was a very good process for us.
Wow, thank you so much for joining us. I feel like life in Finland is a very broad topic to cover, and that is why we're doing these interviews, because there are so many people who have much more experience in particular niches that I don't know about. So thank you for joining us. We are coming to our very last question, and that is give our audience one tip about life, PhD life in Finland. What should they do?
Okay. So my one tip would be, especially to all the international listeners, is that if you want to experience a new culture, a new country, do come to Finland. Finland is a great place to do a PhD, especially if you're looking to do something more independently, more exploring it more by yourself, but at the same time also being part of a lot of engaging research that is happening within this small community.
Amazing. Thank you, Shruti. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Megha.
Okay, so that was a mind-blowing discussion because we just talked about how long does a PhD last in Finland? What do you need to do to be able to do a PhD in Finland? How is life outside the lab in Finland? We've covered all of these interesting topics, so we hope this was a valuable video to you. And all thanks to our special guest today, Shruti Jain. She was our expert on this subject that I have very limited information on. If you have any further comments that we didn't get to in this video, be sure to leave it in the comments below so we can help guide you through the process. We hope this video has made you interested about pursuing your PhD in Finland. Thank you for watching and see you next time.